Hello and welcome to IPEXPO Europe 2014. My name is Doug Drinkwater, the senior reporter at SC Magazine UK, and we're here to find out what the key trends are from the show and why people are visiting.
I think that's the big shift, is that over the last 20 years we've kind of gone, as your pub's been talking about for a while, prevention and then detection. And now we're really clearly moving into the era of response. If you look at what's happened recently with eBay, the Target breach probably being one of the biggest examples. If you are a CISO, you have to assume that a breach is not a question of whether or not, it's just a matter of when. And so you need to be prepared, since that's ultimately how you and your team are going to be measured. We're certainly seeing more interest than we expected to see at this stage in the development of the market. It surprised us how many organizations, even this year, even at the end of last year, the most advanced ones, not knowing what the solution was, but saying, we need a better way to do response, clearly. We're not doing nearly as good of a job here. And so they've got teams commissioned to go find, is it a product, is it people, is it services, how do we tackle the problem? We're kind of in the perfect storm for breaches right now, because on the one hand, we're losing control of our data. Between cloud, mobile, and everything else, data's everywhere, which means our attack surface is bigger than it's ever been. That's one. Two, is the regulatory environment has gotten more complex than it's ever been and more punitive than it's ever been. And then number three, of course, is that the bad guys are more sophisticated and targeted than they've ever been before. And so that's really what's putting an enormous amount of pressure on IT security teams generally, but also really forcing them to up their game from a response perspective. And I think next year is the year where we'll really start to see the equation maybe gel a little bit across people, process, and technology. How do we get our incident response sort of capability together in a credible way? Since I think the end goal really will be that these are just assumed. Incidents are going to happen, breaches are going to occur. We have to assume for that and find a way to establish resilience against those things when they happen, so that instead of it being all hands on deck and everybody going crazy, it's something that we manage in a measurable and consistent way.
Okay, so going forward, starting in 2015, even though financial services organizations are already looking into this very carefully, I think for the first time in history, we have seen payment regulation actually move towards security. And I'm specifically referring to the Payment Services Directive 2. We currently operate under PSD 1, as you know. And for the first time in history, we see great emphasis on security and strong authentication in the directive, which traditionally in the fraud space has concentrating on anti-money laundering. I think it's absolutely right because the way the world is moving, we're all hyper-connected, we want to do payments everywhere, the rise of mobile, and indeed various ventures, and Zap has just announced support of large UK retailers starting next year. So we're seeing new risks and we have to address them. It's not only the Payment Services Directive, but also the EU data protection regulations, UK cybersecurity essentials, for example, which is concentrating on SMEs, and we are going to see much more emphasis on security awareness, not only for businesses but also for private individuals. And indeed the Information Commissioner's Office is doing quite a lot of work in that space, issuing guidelines, which are very good guidelines currently. So I urge everyone to have a look at those.
The threats and risks are definitely going to be increasing, but the biggest challenges are going to be how management, senior management, IT management, how they come together to respond to the ever-increasing cyber attacks. Cyber is not a term normally used these days. In fact, sorry, it is a term used a lot these days, so we'll stick with the word cyber for now. But the reality is management, IT, non-IT management need to come together in the next many, many years to make sure that they can actually respond. Because the reality is people are going to be attacked. The disconnect is still there. I see a lot of it. It is getting better. Senior non-IT management is becoming aware that they need to upskill their IT management. They need to upskill their security folks to be able to talk to the board, to be able to taking a business perspective on cybersecurity.
This year in particular, we've definitely seen the devastating impact a data breach can have on your reputation. And the only way in which we can really solve this issue is by representing information security or cybersecurity as a business issue that requires a business response. So we need to break down those silos. We need to make sure that we have the appropriate leadership and that information security and cybersecurity are represented as a business-wide function. And that's the only way in which we can deliver security effectively within the organisation. Things helping us with this. This next year is, organisations are most definitely going to be working on the EU data protection regulation changes, going to try and prepare on that front. There's just a substantial focus on protecting information and responding to incidents when they occur effectively. I think naturally, with any change there's going to be conflict, there are going to be epic fails, if you like, but something we have to bear in mind is that when the GDPR is introduced, there'll be a 2 year, as I understand it, a 2 year almost resting period where organisations can then implement those necessary safeguards. There have been 4,000 changes in this regulation to the DPA, so it's going to take time, but it's a very positive step forward which will help break down that silo I talked about a minute ago.
The proliferation of mobile devices combined with the power of such mobile devices now, and bring your own device in the workplace, it's just really putting another vector of attack, because we're seeing more and more attacks, more and more applications being developed on the mobile platforms, and this brings with it a whole new range of security threats and vulnerabilities. With a mobile device, you've got a very powerful device in your pocket which you can obviously infiltrate and very easily connect to the corporate Wi-Fi. So managing these devices on the Wi-Fi and making sure that they are secure is becoming a real issue.
Oh, without a question, companies have the skills. I think the issue is time. People don't have the resources or time, and I think one of the biggest challenges companies face is actually managing the data. And it's one thing implementing tools and collecting information, it's another thing actually doing something with that information and understanding the impact. And I think the real challenge lies around a lack of resources. So I think automation of process is going to be key, and one of the challenges faced by companies over the next 12 months, certainly.